You found the skeleton. How would you calculate that design? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on this.
Hey there, YouTube. Welcome back for part 2 of Dragons Are Real. You know the deal. GR is going to tell us why he thinks dragons are real. I'm going to assess the reasonableness of those arguments. Before we start, though, I want to remind you, if you're watching this and you're not subscribed, please go ahead and do that. It's free, it helps me out, and if you hit the bell icon, you'll always be notified when I have more content. Anyway, here we go. Let's hear from GR.
So, of course, you also have Isaiah, you also have others as well, even Daniel. And here it talks about a crooked serpent, and it talks down here of one as well. And so you got a lot of different ones as well in the good book.
Yep, the Bible talks about creatures we call dragons.
But, of course, even a chapter that was removed where it tells you how to actually deal with them as well, where there was a kingdom having a menace in one of these dragons, and they fed him something that was like sweet but had tar, and it apparently didn't go down too well.
So here he's talking about the story of Bel and the Dragon, which is incorporated into chapter 14 of Daniel. It is of obscure origin since it appears in later manuscripts of the Septuagint, but doesn't make an appearance even by allusion in Jewish sources until later in the history of Rabbinic Judaism. Now, to say that it was removed from the Bible is a bit of a stretch. About 62% or so of Christians have this in their biblical canon, with those 62% or so of those Christians worldwide being either Catholic or Eastern Orthodox, both of which include the story in their canonical versions of Daniel. Protestants, having sort of abandoned the Old Testament works with an origin in the Septuagint, but not found in the canon of Rabbinic Judaism, the Masoretic text, don't tend to include such things in their editions of the Bible. But the fact that in the USA some 65+% of Christians don't have this in their Bible doesn't mean it was just removed from the Bible. There is no single universally accepted canon of the Bible in Christianity, although all versions share in common the vast majority of the texts, and the Protestant 66 books can be seen as a minimalist canon, including all the books that are more or less universal and rejecting any that are not. But anyway, yes, in this book, Daniel kills a dragon by poisoning it with a weird concoction of tar and hair. And in this work, which only comes to us in Greek, and may well have been composed in that language, we have a creature which is referred to as drakon, a word which is interchangeable with ophis, or snake. Dragon in Greek just means scaly thing, or something reminiscent of a lizard. So apparently, if the story is to be believed, Daniel killed a scaly thing. This isn't even obviously a dragon in the modern sense. It could just as well have been some big monitor lizard, like a Nile monitor, that was being kept in a temple as a cultic animal that represents a god. At least with Leviathan, we have good reason to say this isn't a known animal.
So, at any rate, we even have stories of recent where they talk about some of this. It's really intriguing because you can kind of see through it and see like maybe there's more there than they're realizing. Like I mentioned back here, you have this Draco, which, like I said, if you look into it, it makes perfect sense. So the only reason you see the skull is because it had hollow bones. You wouldn't have the rest of it.
But like we talked about the last time, we do have the rest of it, because it's Pachycephalosaurus. And no, we don't have every single bone of Pachycephalosaurus known, but we sure do know it wasn't a fire-breathing, fiery snake monster. It was a marginocephalian ornithischian dinosaur.
And it looks literally like it, of course. Then getting over to this interesting article here where they found recently a 50-foot dragon dinosaur that some farmers found in China. And of course, what's intriguing about it is
that the same way Western scientists put saurus at the end of basically every dinosaur name, because that comes from the Greek savros, meaning lizard, more specifically than drakon, as opposed to ophis, which means snake, even though snakes are lizards. The Chinese scientists like to put lung into the name of dinosaurs because it's their word for what we call dragon, even though the only real connection to Western dragon is being long and vaguely serpentine.
Sometimes they'll find these bones, like, a mile away. I really don't understand why they do stuff like this. Like, they'll find the head over here, and then they'll go, 100 feet over there, and they'll find, the tail, it must be the same thing. It could be something completely different.
Gee, what a shock that people use culturally relevant words to name things in science. What's next? Are we going to hear that the sonic hedgehog gene is proof of an actual blue hedgehog that can roll into a ball shape at high speeds while collecting rings? Generally, no. Paleontologists do not do this. If they were to do so, you could check it in their papers, because real paleontologists unlike that fraud Mark Armitage, give you both in situ pictures of the find as well as a site map and precise coordinates for each specimen. That being said, is the complaint that many dragons are chimerical? I don't know what the point is. If we were more conservative in assigning various fossil elements to the same individual, that would not make dinosaurs more like dragons, it would just make them less well known overall. I don't know how that helps the case that dragons are real.
You know what I mean? And I think that actually happens sometimes. If I recall correctly, I think that's what happens with this story. So I'm kind of wondering if they turned it into some very long-necked brontosaurus or something. I don't know. It's kind of odd.
Okay, let's take a look at this article. It's incredible 50-foot dragon dinosaur unearthed by Chinese farmers by Naomi Ng for CNN, last updated on January 30th, 2015. It is, of course, just a popular level report on the paper, a new sauropod dinosaur from the late Jurassic of China and the diversity, distribution, and relationships of Mamenchisaurids by Jing et al., published in the Journal of Vertebrate Paleontology, 26 January 2015. It reports on the find of a new sauropod in China, named in that paper Qijianlong Guoker, the nutshell dragon of Qijian. It consists of the posterior portion of a cranium, most of the spine, and some elements of the hip, primarily parts of the pubis. It was found in two mostly articulated sections of vertebrae, one from the base of the skull to at least the shoulder, and one section of caudal vertebrae. There were also some scattered non-axial components like a rib and the aforementioned partial pubic bone. This find is consistent with the known Jurassic sauropod fauna of China and is closely related to Mamenchisaurus. I don't know why it is that this is evidence of a dragon and not a late Jurassic sauropod, but the paper is linked below. See if you can tell why the sauropod is supposed to be a dragon.
If you look at the face, it doesn't look the same as what they're showing here either. That looks kind of different.
What face? The paper doesn't have the face, and that was just some artist's impression of a Mamenchisaurid sauropod. The actual find didn't even have the anterior part of the cranium. You know, the part you'd call a face. I can now say with some confidence that GR here did not read the paper in question, or if he did, he couldn't understand anything that he read.
But I think I covered that specific article like 5 years ago. But getting into some other things here, like I said, if you look at it into this more, you realize there is a lot of stories about this where you have Marco Polo, you have Alexander the Great, and a lot of other famous people who speak about these creatures, and a lot of other historians like Herodotus, Josephus, and many others as well speak about this.
And like we've already covered, their use of the word dragon also includes known animals like crocodilians, large monitors, large snakes, and perhaps animals like the Indian gharial. Additionally, they were not all very reliable, and in the case of Marco Polo, those aren't even his words. So if you want to say that dragons exist and they are just crocodilians, boas, and monitor lizards, okay. It's not the normal modern use of the word dragon, but hey, if we can call the largest monitor lizards on Earth the Komodo dragons, and do you want to call the Nile crocodile a Nile dragon? I won't stop you. But you have to realize that going back to a broader definition of dragon and calling known animals by that word isn't really a significant claim in terms of history or biology. You're just playing word games.
And in my other video on my other channel, I showed some actual videos, which is really intriguing because if you go look around for videos of dragons, you're going to find a lot of stuff that don't look real. Okay, let's just put it that way. It's a lot of like something like your son would watch, like, wow, could that be real? And you're like looking, you're like, no, it's not real. Trust me.
So now I'm expecting to see some 100% verifiably real dragon footage, and not the kind of thing I could do in Blender with a free dragon asset and a couple hours of time.
Almost all of it looks like it's just made up by someone on some video editing software. But there are a couple clips that actually look sort of legit, or actually could be very much legit. The only way it could be not real is if you had a very, very good professional video editor, some guy that's like top notch who might have been able to make it.
So far, I'm leaning pretty hard on that X button, but also such people do exist and they do make fun videos for the internet.
And I don't think a lot of those guys really want to spend their time making them, so it makes it more credible.
Why wouldn't professional VFX artists have side projects that they do for fun?
And like in the case of this one looks very credible. You can't really... And I'm not a professional video editor, but I am pretty good with photos and such. And I don't really see a lot of going on around this thing. You would have to pull it in and do some negative on the images to see if there's any editing or any... You would want the originals though, but you would look for editing around.
Or, it could be an alpha mask render of a dragon projected onto an existing clean plate and then composited from there, which wouldn't leave any masking artifacts, since coming out of a 3D renderer, the mask will be perfectly clean.
This and the negatives, but if you look at this, it looks pretty legit, okay? It looks pretty legit, actually.
Would have been nice to see more than a few stills. No matter, I found the video. It's 3 videos of strange creatures like dragons flying in the sky. From the channel DXP channel. It's linked in the description. It says that this dragon is an alien spotted over the secret city of the CIA. It's followed up by a video of a purported angel during a lightning storm in LA. The angel is just a bright spot. I have no idea why it's supposed to be an angel. The third video is supposed to be a unicorn in Korea, specifically Yangdong. It just looks like someone was having fun in After Effects, since the perspective on the creature never changes, nor does its size change in the frame significantly despite the fact that it should be retreating from the camera. The channel also credulously reports on an incident of what amounts to Silver Surfer flying past a plane. While I couldn't identify the particular dragon asset used in the video GR is interested in, it certainly does not look like something the average Blender user couldn't do with one tutorial on animation, another on camera tracking, and a third on masking. To go from downloading Blender to being able to produce a video of that quality, you'd need about a week and about $150 for a decent dragon model and some clean footage of landscape.
So, and of course that's in China.
Remember, it's in the secret CIA city in China. I don't know why China is letting the CIA have a secret city within their borders. Is it because the CIA has dragon monitoring equipment and China doesn't? Is this a secret conspiracy about dragons that the lizard people are controlling both them and the CIA? I don't know, but I will say that certainly did not look like a Chinese dragon.
Which is intriguing because I also played some audio from China as well, where these people, and they apparently believe that there is a dragon in their area. And I played the audio, and it is rather intriguing. It sounds very loud. Whatever it is, it's a large animal. It's very loud. Let's see. I don't know if it's going to still play any. Let me play some.
So, why does the dragon sound like a tiger played over a loudspeaker?
Let's go to the show. Good morning, Zion.
Maybe because that's what it was. That's what the Chinese government says. And while I don't simply accept the statements of the Chinese government at face value, it does sound like a tiger. And a hoax using tiger sounds seems way more likely than a dragon, since we know that both hoaxes and tigers exist, but we can't say that for dragons. Could it have been a dragon? I guess it's not ontologically impossible, but we have very good alternative explanations and no reason to believe the dragon option over any of them.
All right, it's pretty obvious to me. It's a very, very loud noise that they're hearing, because those are some huge hills, and they're in a really big area, and it seems to be echoing quite well. Whatever it is, it's pretty far away and it's pretty loud.
I agree. The loudspeakers are probably fairly distant and out of sight. To maintain the illusion of a mysterious animal calling. Also note that the people in the crowd are cracking Godzilla jokes. They don't really seem all that awed by the supposed presence of a dragon. It's really not proof of anything. But I do think if the crowd honestly believed that the creatures straight out of their national mythology and iconography were really there, they might be a bit more serious.
I don't know what would make that noise.
GR doesn't know what would make that noise because the answer is, it's a tiger, and he never bothered to investigate any more than just listening to the YouTube short and taking it at face value, as presented by a conspiracy channel that also thinks there are deep water pyramids and giants in modern Afghanistan. It took me less than a minute to realize that it sounded like a cat, and less than one more minute to find footage of a tiger making exactly that sound. GR isn't stumped, he's motivated to think it's mysterious, even when it isn't. He isn't interested in what's actually true, but what he wants to be true. And here's the thing. I want dragons to be real. That would be so awesome. But my desires don't place any obligation on the universe that they be fulfilled, and I don't get to pretend that they do.
They seem to think it's a dragon. The people there in that video.
A dragon named Godzilla, apparently.
And I guess some of them actually believe there are some in certain areas of China still. And it wouldn't be too surprising, actually, considering
that there is no verifiable evidence of a dragon in China whatsoever beyond the extinct dinosaurs, whose bones were explained as dragon bones?
If you look at the places that had the most dragons, it was mainly China and Romania were the most well-known to have a ton of dragons. And China's probably the one, hands down, that had the most. So,
you got a citation for that?
If there are a couple in China, it wouldn't be too surprising. If there were any left, they would probably be there. And the only legitimate video footage I've seen that looks like it could be real is from there.
It doesn't look like a Chinese dragon, and comes from, again, a purported CIA city, as told by a channel that also thought that obviously fake footage of Silver Surfer hanging out by a commercial jet was legit.
And, you know what I mean? So, who knows? I guess I also showed another clip of something intriguing in a cave that was swimming around that no one seems to be able to identify. It has arms. It's really odd looking.
By no one was able to identify, I have to assume that he means he and his conspiracy idiot compatriots couldn't identify it. I, however, knew it was an olm immediately. Olms are aquatic cave salamanders from Europe, specifically caves in Slovenia, Italy, Croatia, Bosnia, and Herzegovina. There are introduced populations as well. They are a bit mysterious, because it's hard to study troglodytic animals in general, since the deep dark recesses of caves are generally inhospitable to long-term human habitation. And yes, what about cavemen? Well, cave-dwelling people tend not to live deep in caves. Instead, they live closer to the cave entrances and make occasional visits deeper into caves.
I just simply mention that because a lot of the historical accounts are that they live in caves, and there are historical accounts of some living in water and some flying.
Well, olms do live in caves, and in the water in caves, but they don't fly. And it is true that some of the first reports of olms did describe them as baby dragons, but again, if all a dragon is just some known extant species that GR wants to call a dragon, then this isn't extraordinary. I don't know what his point is. No one who says that dragons aren't real is saying that nothing that is real was ever referred to as a dragon. They're saying that the winged fire-breathing serpents of folklore are not actual animals.
So, I mean, you know what I mean? At any rate, there's even, as late as the 1900s, there were some stories. You have stories as recent as the early 1900s where you have elderly folk in Glamorgan, a historical county of Wales, would tell of a colony of winged serpents that lived in the woods around Penllyn Castle.
This all stems back to a book called Folklore and Folk Stories of Wales by Marie Trevelyan. I have a link to it in the description, although I think it only works if you're in the United States. Anyway, it's a 1909 book in which the author says that some elderly people told her that they heard stories about winged serpents around at the castle. For those of you interested, this chapter starts on page 165. Sorry, but a woman telling a story about some old people who heard the elderly tell stories about winged serpents when they were kids, in a book that also reports on the life and activities of Merlin, isn't what I'd call the best historical source for the real existence of small flying dragons in Wales.
The woods around Penllyn Castle, Glamorgan, had the reputation of being frequented by winged serpents. These were a terror of old and young alike. The aged inhabitant of Penllyn, who were gone a few years ago, that is his boyhood, the winged serpents were described as very beautiful. They were coiled when in repose and looked as if they were covered with jewels of all sorts. Some of them had crests sparkling with all colors of the rainbow.
Note that this man doesn't claim to have seen the animals in question, but to have had them described to him, and doesn't even claim in this section that the people who described them to him had seen them.
When disturbed, they glided swiftly, sparkling all over, to their hiding places. When they were angry, they flew over people's heads with outspread wings, bright and sometimes with eyes too, like the feathers of a peacock's tail. And he said it was no old story invented to, but as a real fact. So apparently he had seen them.
No, he didn't say that. He said that it was reported as a fact. What he said was that they were described to him. If he had seen them, he wouldn't need to report a second-hand description. He'd give a first-hand account, which he did not. Is GR just not able to read? Does that explain all this nonsense?
And actually, there's more than that, too. The Aborigines in Australia have accounts of their ancestors having encountered creatures that today, by any reckoning, you would describe those being dinosaurs on the basis of scientists' reconstruction from fossils.
Goodness, that's from a creationist documentary I've already covered on the channel. Suffice it to say that creationists dishonestly reported art from a children's book by an Aboriginal author based on an already famous painting of a plesiosaur as evidence of ancient Australian human contact with actual plesiosaurs. Never mind that the art is a direct tracing of an incorrect paleontological reconstruction, and that it is in a modern book and is not ancient art. Basically, everything about this claim is, at best, completely misunderstood by those making it, or at worst, just dishonest.
on a personal level. I recall meeting a university teacher in the Northern Territory in Darwin after giving a presentation there a couple years ago, and she said she had been working with local Larraque Aboriginal people, and she said, and they had a word for a fierce creature that lived in the local swamps there that used to give them trouble.
Yeah, the bunyip, a legendary water monster from Australia with no consistent features beyond being aquatic, scary, and eating people, especially women and children. I don't know how many times I can point this out, but the fact that there is folklore to investigate is not evidence of the truth of that folklore in the first place.
So, and actually this is something I've heard too, also with supposedly pterodactyls in the Congo, in Africa.
Gee, sure would be nice if he bothered to say where it is in the Congo, when and where he got this. But as is, it's just him saying some group of which he is a part has a story about a pterosaur in the Congo. Neat. But unless we have something to investigate, it's just his word. And as we've already seen, he's not to be trusted with verifying facts.
And we even have newspaper clippings from the 1900s talking about some sort of brontosaurus in Africa as well.
Mokele Mbembe is a cryptid that is supposedly a swamp-dwelling sauropod. Never mind, the sauropods didn't really dwell in swamps. Also, when you look into the origin and etymology of it, you find that it doesn't really check out, and that the animal may well have simply been a recent invention of the locals to impress white explorers and exploit their gullibility, since such people often come with goods to which the locals have little or no access, and trade them in exchange for fantastical stories. Basically, it's more likely that local Congolese people are conning dumb white people by making up stories than it is that there's a sauropod in the Congo, that no one can find a trace for. And see, the Congo is home to at least two known animals that at one time were only rumors: gorillas and the okapi. It wasn't that long ago that most of the world simply didn't believe these large mammals even existed, even though they were well known to the locals, who even ate them from time to time. But the difference between a gorilla or an okapi and Mokele Mbembe is that when you mount an expedition to find gorillas or okapi, you can find them. So far, no one has ever found Mokele Mbembe. Until they do, those stories remain just that.
I saw some newspaper, I don't know if it was a famous, esteemed newspaper, where they were talking about having some sort of sighting in Africa like that. So you have these, and there's like an entire area in Africa the size of Texas, a swamp the size of Texas, in the Congo, which no people go into.
Weird, because as far as I can tell, the Aka people, also called the Bayaka, seem to live in the region and have interactions with native animals of that swamp, namely the Western Congolian swamp forest, which is indeed the largest continuous wetland in the world. Heck, they're even known to hunt the western lowland gorillas and forest elephants of the region. I'd say they go there.
Because you can't really live there.
You know, except the people who do.
There was a evolutionary biologist that went there to talk to some tribes that were nearby. He mentioned that there were so many insects and mosquitoes and just bugs flying around that they were just landing on you nonstop. It was just like, there's no way you could live there. I mean...
Man, if only people had ever come up with ways to repel insects. Oh wait, they have for tens of thousands of years, and interestingly, the Aka people who live there move around, and so aren't just sitting in a swamp being eaten by bugs all year.
I guess the tribal people that are able to live there somehow, but...
Seriously, after all that, he acknowledged that the people do live there? So what, they just don't count? Like, why say that an area is uninhabited and make a big deal about how impenetrable it is, then to just mention that, yeah, people do live there? I'm trying not to attribute this to racism, but honestly, what am I supposed to think when you say a region is uninhabited, except for the people who live there? I mean, yeah, sure, France is uninhabited, except for all the French people. See how crazy that is? Yeah, this isn't any less crazy.
It's not a pleasant place to live, okay? The biggest swamp in the world, and the people there, some of the tribal people were... he was showing them pictures of dinosaurs, and there was a couple dinosaur pictures that they pointed to and had their own names for them, and said they had lived there, and one of them was a pterodactyl.
Already covered it.
So, I mean, theoretically, maybe there are a couple in these places that no one goes. Just like the ocean, there's 90+% of the ocean that hasn't even been explored. Who knows what's entirely in the ocean? We really haven't explored any of it. We've only explored like 2 to 5% from what I understand.
But weird how when scientists go down there to explore new parts or even revisit parts they've been to before, and then discover new species, the organisms are never bizarre mythical hybrids like dragons. They're always members of already known groups. We get new kinds of fish or flatworm or sea slug or whatever, but it's never a mermaid or a hippocampus.
And I did a video on the Mariana Trench and some big sea monster being there as well, according to some huge gaping metal marks on their sub that they brought down there one time. They couldn't think of anything that could actually create those marks. So,
like, was the submarine scratched? What is actually the story here? Who was this? When? Where? I don't know. Just some vague story that some submarine had marks. We're not even told what kind of marks, just that they were metal, which I don't even know if that means the metal was added, deformed, or scraped away.
Whatever it was something big. You know what I mean? I'll have to do a video on that sometime as well. But I find this stuff all very intriguing. I'm kind of wondering what some of you guys think about all this. Let me know in the comment section below. Thanks for watching.
Well, I think we all know what I think, and it's that this has presented nothing that even comes close to being evidence for any unknown creatures that could reasonably be termed a dragon in terms of modern usage. I bet we could say that some of the known animals could reasonably be described as dragons according to the older, broader usage of the word. Beyond that, we saw a fantastically low ability to fact-check, essentially no skepticism of anything, except, actual evidence, and wild speculation. That's about what I've come to expect from these conspiracy-type channels. Oh well, I hope you liked this look at the supposed historical reality of dragons from God Rules 2. If you did, make sure you hit like on this video. If you didn't, hit dislike and tell me what you didn't like in the comments. Either way, I hope you subscribe and hit the bell icon to turn on all notifications. That way you're always notified when I have new content, which is usually 3 times a week. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur. I just want to take a moment to thank all my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Ben Tovand, Denny5252, Ian Chen, John Ackerman, Chris Love, Landon Knoll, Sphincter of Doom, Star Runner, and Patrick Dennis. It's because of my channel members and patrons that this channel can keep on going at the blistering pace of 2 to 3 and almost always 3 uploads per week. And because I do run this channel at a slight loss, it is very important that anyone who can afford to and really likes my content, please do consider joining the Patreon or joining the channel with the link below. Patreon link is in the description. On Patreon, you can join at a 10% discount if you join for an annual subscription. And if for some reason you can't afford it, or an annual or monthly pledge isn't for you, there are always other ways to help out the channel. There's an Amazon wishlist linked in the description. There's also a merch store full of almost everything that Teespring makes.